COVID-19. And basically, I'm going to build upon whatever Ahmed has said. And there might be a little bit of overlap, but then I'm going to quickly go through that overlap part. So there are main three objectives of my talk. Number one, is there a role for rehabilitation services in COVID-19? And if there's a role, what is the evidence? And the last, that what is the experience of rehabilitation services for COVID-19 patients all around the globe, and particularly in Pakistan and low middle income countries. Before I start, a little bit of disclaimer. We need to understand that COVID-19 was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization on 11th of March 2020. This means that less than 7 months have passed before the world was exposed to this pandemic, a global health issue. So evidence is still coming in. And most of the evidence that is available on the role of rehabilitation in COVID-19 is basically based either on small case report, small case series, observational studies, mini reviews, expert and consensus opinion. In addition, most of this published material has come from either from China, Europe, and USA. We do not have a lot of experience sharing from developing countries and Asian countries like Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh. So we need to consider this particular presentation with this disclaimer and background. So Ahmed has just told you in detail what rehabilitation is all about. And I'll quickly go through the World Health Organization definition of rehabilitation, which defines rehabilitation as a set of interventions needed when a person is experiencing or likely to experience limitations in everyday functioning due to aging or a health condition, including chronic disease or disorder, injuries, or traumas. So I'm going to explain how COVID-19 fits in this health condition part or a chronic disease part. And that's why there's a role for rehabilitation interventions, both in the acute phase and in the long-term convalescence phase. So to answer the first question, is there a role for rehabilitation interventions in COVID-19? And the quick short answer is yes. There is a definite role for providing rehabilitation interventions to patients having COVID-19. Now the question is, what is the evidence? Now you can take the evidence in two parts. One is the direct evidence, that what has been published in the literature so far in form of small case report, case series, observational studies, which show that different kind of rehabilitation interventions do have some role to play in patient having COVID-19. And then there is an indirect evidence. Indirect evidence means that you can actually extrapolate the evidence generated in the last 40 years on the role of rehabilitation in different diseases. And you can apply that evidence on provision of rehabilitation services for COVID-19 patients. And I'll quickly go through that. And for that, you need to consider that a COVID-19 patient can have generally four kind of major issues. Number one, respiratory complications. In those of the COVID-19 patient who deteriorate and then they are admitted to an intensive care unit or ICU may develop ICU related complications, neurological involvement and complications, and the general ill health, fatigue, and what we now call as the long haulers of COVID-19. Primarily, COVID-19 is a respiratory pathogen and it involves the respiratory system. And in severe cases, it leads to the classic COVID-19 pneumonia, the ground glass appearance on a CT scan or a X-ray chest. If the condition deteriorates, the patient might develop acute respiratory distress syndrome. Apart from that, we need to consider that there's a category of patients who are already having a pre-existing respiratory disease, probably in form of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, bronchial asthma, cystic fibrosis, or any other respiratory illness. Now, these patients are at high risk of developing severe COVID-19 related complication. And most of these patients in the above three categories, they are more liable to develop lung damage and scarring. And this would lead to a prolonged recovery period. Again, evidence of the last 40 years clearly shows that there is a role for pulmonary rehabilitation, respiratory therapy, or chest physiotherapy in the management of all these three things. So extrapolating on that evidence and combining it with the new evidence that is coming up, we can say that there is a definite role for rehabilitation in COVID-19 patients. Then patients who are admitted to intensive care units for any reason, whether COVID-19 or non-COVID-19 reasons, they are liable to develop certain important complications like critical illness polyneuropathy, critical illness myopathy. Now, these can actually prolong the length of stay of the patient in the ICU, and it might result in difficulty in weaning of the patient from the ventilator. Apart from that, these patients are at high risk of developing pressure ulcers and what we call post-intensive care syndrome, the PICS. PICS is a relatively new thing, and some rehabilitation professionals are not very clear what PICS is all about. But PICS is something that you develop once you are discharged from the ICU and you go back and start transitioning to your community, to your home again. And that is the point when medically you are fit. Probably you might be having a negative test for COVID-19, but the person is not feeling good enough. And there are three categories of issues that the patient might have in PICS: cognitive, psychiatric, and physical. The cognitive may include like decreased memory, thinking problems, forgetfulness, poor concentration, and trouble organizing the problem solving. The psychiatric impairments may include a PTSD. Imagine somebody on a ventilator or spending some time in an ICU, whether for COVID-19 or some unrelated issue. It is a major physical and psychological trauma. For example, in our own hospital, there was a patient who remained in ICU for 55 days. He actually he walked out of the hospital after 55 days, but remaining in the ICU is a major trauma, both psychological and physical. So patients are more liable to develop PTSD. Apart from that, they might have anxiety, depression, or decreased motivation. And the physical impairment that result as part of PICS include muscle weakness, fatigue, decreased mobility, and difficulty in breathing. Now, this is the point where a rehabilitation professional, the team can come in together and provide service in order to reduce the incidence of PICS and in order to allow the patient a early reintegration back into the life. Initially, it was thought that COVID-19 is primarily a respiratory pathogen and it only involves the respiratory system or the lungs. Lot of evidence has been documented in the last 3 to 4 months that there are certain important neurological manifestation and complications of COVID-19 as well that should be considered, and many of them can be classified as major neurological complication. These might be manifestation of COVID or complication of COVID. It includes stroke, specifically the ischemic strokes, Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a form of acute post-infectious peripheral polyneuropathy, encephalitis and meningitis, myelopathy involving the spine, skeletal muscle inflammation, confusion, and disorientation. And again, if you extrapolate the information and evidence of the last 30, 40 years, there is a clear-cut evidence that providing interdisciplinary rehabilitation services to all kinds of patients with stroke, GBS, encephalitis, meningitis, myelopathy can improve the outcomes and reduce the complication. So even if the patient is having all these complications as part of COVID-19, there is a definite role for offering them interdisciplinary rehabilitation. A very important thing that has recently come up in the last 2-3 months, and it is important that we rehabilitation professionals give it some importance, is that 80% of patients with COVID-19 will recover with little or no sequelae. Around 10 to 20% are going to go to the hospital, they are going to get admitted, and they might actually end up in an ICU. But again, most of them would recover within 3 to 4 weeks. There is a new category of patients emerging up who are having persistent symptom of COVID-19 even after months having this COVID-19. And this is what we call at long haulers. A lot of debate has been generated both in the layman press and in the scientific article that what is these long haulers, how do they present, and what is the implication of having a person with a persistent COVID-19 symptom for months and months after they have been cleared from the hospital. And just to give you an idea, the patient narrative, look at this. Fiona from US, she's a writer, by the way. She says, it almost feels like I have been hit by a truck at 4 p.m. each day. 4 p.m. is somewhat between the middle of the day. Imagine that you have no energy left to do anything in the middle of the day. Just imagine the kind of fatigue and the kind of frustration you are going to have. And you might want to listen to what Professor Paul Gardner has to say. And Paul Gardner is no ordinary person. He is actually a professor of infectious disease at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, which practically means that this gentleman actually makes his living by conducting research on this kind of infectious disease. So he says, I have had dengue, I have had malaria, I have never been as ill as this illness. And it's really frightening because it's so unpredictable. It's the worst illness I've ever had. I'm still dealing with exhaustion. So chronic fatigue after COVID-19 is a major issue to deal with. And the experts have said that we really have to pay attention now that COVID-19 has created these long haulers. People who go through this for months get really anxious and frustrated and depressed, and they don't know how long they can keep fighting. And probably here is the importance what Dr. Ahmed has said. Look at the bigger picture. Do not focus on the illness itself. Focus on the holistic picture, how that illness affects the person as a whole, the community and the family. And probably you can understand the concept of long haulers. We don't have a lot of data about long haulers in the scientific literature. So far, I was able to identify 2 studies. They're pretty small studies. One is from Italy and the other is from France. The Italian study, they documented the outcome of patient at 60 days, 2 months. And the French study, they contacted their patient at 110 days after their discharge from the hospital for COVID-19. 87% of the patient who were interviewed, and it was documented that they were having at least one persistent COVID-19 related symptom. And these included fatigue, dyspnea, joint pains, poor quality of life, loss of memory, and sleep disorder, which means that, the work of a rehabilitation professional might even go on beyond when the patient is declared free from COVID-19 symptoms or has been declared COVID-19 negative. Coming to the experience of COVID-19 we have around the globe, again, as Ahmed just mentioned, a lot of research has been done and published. So as of today, more than 1,000 articles on different aspects of COVID-19 rehabilitation have been published in Medline. I'm not going to summarize all of them, just to give you the highlights. First of all, yes, most of the rehabilitation services all around the globe, they were either closed down completely or they were converted into isolation or acute care medical units, and the staff was relocated to the medical unit to provide a different kind of service apart from rehabilitation. And those centers who were still providing rehabilitation services, they were having issues with physical distancing. Now, physical therapy and rehabilitation, as Ahmed mentioned, is not just like a consultation, a distant consultation. You have to get close to the patient. You have to provide a certain kind of physical therapy exercises and services which require a lot of physical contact between the patient. So how would you maintain this physical distancing, right? Then the issue with staffing. So there was increase in number of ICU units all around the globe, but you have increased number of ICU units or ICU beds, but you don't have compatible number of therapists or rehabilitation professionals who were trained in providing rehabilitation services in the ICUs. And then the challenge with provision of PPE. Then there was a great variation in the rehabilitation response. It varied from early, effective, and integrated in countries like USA, China, and Europe, who already have a very pretty good pre-existing rehabilitation services in place and who had these backup plans as well, to a relatively poor, absent, and unintegrated rehabilitation response, specifically in Africa, which has been documented, and other lower middle income countries, including Pakistan and Bangladesh. The protocols were almost the same, and Ahmed has mentioned this in detail already, that please, you need to understand one thing. Whenever a disaster strikes, whether it is a man-made disaster or a global healthcare pandemic like COVID-19, people with pre-existing disabilities don't disappear. They have their needs which need to be addressed. And it was a major issue which was raised in the last 3 months, that patients with pre-existing disabilities are being neglected because of the reasons mentioned in detail by Dr. Ahmed. And it has been documented in literature as well. And this was a recent report of Guardian published like a couple of days back, that COVID-19 disruption leaves thousands of US stroke patients disabled. So imagine the patient with stroke living in Pakistan probably, who might be having all these kind of challenges. Then we have to cater for patient with COVID-19. You need to understand there are probably 3 categories: the severely ill patient, mild symptom, and long haulers. So obviously, mild symptom patient do not require a kind of interdisciplinary rehabilitation. You might want to focus only on the severely ill, the patient who go to the ICUs, and the long haulers who have been discharged to the community, but they are still complaining of poor health and limitation in mobility and joint pains and poor quality of life. Protocols were almost the same, whether it is a patient of COVID-19 or a non-COVID-19 patient. But the increased emphasis was on staff safety and patient selection. And a lot of guidelines have been mentioned in the literature. These are all free full text available. I would strongly recommend anyone who is about to restart or about to upgrade rehabilitation services in the wake of COVID-19 might want to review these good guidelines coming from all part of the globe. They relate to physical therapy, they relate to pulmonary rehabilitation, they relate to spasticity management during outpatient. They also relate to provision of speech and language pathology services during COVID-19, and also the patient and caregiver guidelines to manage COVID-19 patient at home during isolation. So good material is available out there. You need to do a quick search and you will find all of these. Ahmed has described this in detail, but there's evidence coming up that in areas where rehabilitation services were totally closed down, telemedicine and remote rehabilitation to some extent actually filled the gap. And telerehabilitation in these cases, it promotes the protected early discharge to home, and it ensures the continuity of care for patients with COVID-19 and also for patients without COVID-19. For example, patient with pre-existing stroke, rheumatoid arthritis, chronic back pains, arthritis, and stuff like that. And it is possible to share your complex cases and data with other hospitals and clinics and your colleagues in order to get their perspective and get guidance from them. And obviously, right now, it's not a major issue, at least in Pakistan, but in the initial days, PPE conservation was a major issue. So whenever you are having issue with PPE, probably shifting to a remote rehabilitation or telemedicine would actually help you conserve PPEs. And there are a lot of evidence in the last 4 months that has come up, and I'm only going to share the references with you. So it all comes down to you, that what can you do as a professional, as a rehabilitation professional, or maybe even as a non-rehabilitation professional, to improve these services. So probably you need to be proactive and you need to educate. So I mean, I know that in most of the cases, rehabilitation professionals were not part of the mainstream acute medical response to COVID-19. I can understand that, but probably it's time that you become proactive. You go to your colleagues in internal medicine, pulmonology, intensive care, ICU, and you educate them and the general public of the value of integrating an interdisciplinary rehabilitation, both in the acute phase when the patient is in the ICU, and in the long hauling phase when the patient is transitioning to the community and to the home. Apart from that, you come from different backgrounds, different countries, cities, institutions, and different specialties. All of you have a unique experience, whether you are a student or maybe a resident or a attending physician or a rehabilitation professional providing service. You have your own unique experience. Probably it's a good idea to document that experience so that others can also learn from you and improve their services. And last but not the least, you have to generate evidence specifically both in context of acute rehab and in context of long haulers. So summary point is that although evidence is building up, but there is evidence so far that early rehabilitation interventions can reduce reduce complication, improve outcomes, and different patients have different degree of dysfunction. Apart from that, personalized plans are needed according to the patient age, gender, occupation, physical condition. And the take-home message is that this stuff is real. People are ill. Doctors need to stop diagnosing this as anxiety. We have messed up before. Let's not do it again with long-term COVID-19 illness. Thank you very much. Okay.